Hey there, fellow travelers on the wild road of life. Ever feel like your relationships are less like a smooth drive and more like a demolition derby? Well, buckle up, because today we're talking about how Stoicism, that ancient philosophy that sounds like it's all about gritting your teeth and never smiling, totally flipped the script on my love life. And trust me, it was a script that desperately needed flipping. A personal revelation. So, let's set the scene. Imagine me, your humble narrator, about 5 years ago. I was deep into a relationship with Sarah, a fantastic, vibrant, and incredibly independent woman. And therein lay the rub. My idea of a healthy relationship at the time was, well, let's just say, it leaned heavily on the interdependent, practically fused at the hip side of things. Sarah, bless her heart, needed her space. She needed her friends, her hobbies, her solo adventures. And me? I interpreted that as, she's pulling away. She doesn't love me as much. Cue the dramatic music, the internal monologues of self-doubt, and the passive-aggressive comments that, looking back, were about as subtle as a foghorn in a library. I was a master of overthinking, a grand champion of jumping to conclusions, and an Olympic-level warrior. Every late text, every canceled plan, every moment she spent without me felt like a personal affront, a direct assault on my fragile sense of security. I'd tie myself in knots trying to fix her, to make her see things my way, to get her to be, well, more like me. And spoiler alert, trying to change someone else is about as effective as trying to herd cats with a wet noodle. It just doesn't work. Our arguments became cyclical. I'd get anxious, she'd feel suffocated, I'd get more anxious, and she'd pull back further. It was a toxic dance, and we were both exhausted. I truly loved her, but my anxiety and need for control were slowly, painstakingly eroding the very foundation of our connection. I remember one particularly spectacular fight, where I accused her of not caring enough about us because she wanted to spend a Saturday afternoon hiking with her sister instead of binging Netflix with me. Yes, I know, peak drama queen right there. The look on her face, a mix of frustration, sadness, and sheer bewilderment, hit me like a ton of bricks. That was a wake-up call. I knew something had to change, but I had no idea what. Then, almost by accident, I stumbled upon Stoicism. I'd heard whispers of it, mostly in the context of ancient philosophers with long beards and even longer names. But I figured, what's the harm? At this point, I'd try anything short of consulting a relationship guru who communicates exclusively through interpretive dance. And let me tell you, it was like finding an instruction manual for my own chaotic brain. It wasn't an overnight fix, no magic wand, but it was a lifeline. It gave me a framework, a set of tools, and a completely different perspective on how to navigate the turbulent waters of my own emotions, and, by extension, my relationship with Sarah. It changed everything. My Stoic relationship makeover. So, how did this ancient philosophy, cooked up by folks in togas, actually help me become less of a control freak and more of a loving partner? It all boils down to a few core Stoic principles that, once I actually wrapped my head around them, were total game changers. The dichotomy of control, my new mantra. The first, and arguably most foundational concept, is the dichotomy of control. This is basically the Stoic mic drop. Some things are within your control, and some things are not. Your thoughts, your reactions, your efforts, your character. Those are firmly in your court. Your partner's thoughts, their feelings, their actions, the weather, the economy, whether your favorite coffee shop is out of oat milk. Those? Not so much. For a long time, I lived in this bizarre fantasy land where I believed I could somehow will Sarah to behave exactly as I wanted her to. I thought if I worried enough, if I complained enough, if I loved her enough, in my own anxious way, she would somehow magically conform to my ideal. Newsflash: people are not puppets. Trying to control someone else is a recipe for frustration, resentment, and eventually a relationship graveyard. Once I truly started internalizing this, it was like a massive weight lifted off my shoulders. I realized that my anxiety stemmed from trying to control things that were inherently uncontrollable. Sarah's need for space? Not in my control. My reaction to her need for space? Totally in my control. I could choose to interpret it as rejection and spiral into a pity party, or I could choose to acknowledge her autonomy, trust her, and focus on what I could control. My own thoughts, my own actions, my own self-soothing. This was a radical shift for me. Instead of spending hours agonizing over why Sarah hadn't texted back immediately, I started asking myself, is this within my control? No. Can I choose how I react to this? Yes. This simple question became my mental bouncer, kicking out all the unproductive, anxious thoughts that used to take up prime real estate in my brain. Emotional regulation, taming the inner beast. Next up, emotional regulation. Now, this isn't about becoming a robot, devoid of all feeling. That's a common misconception about Stoicism. It's about recognizing that your emotions, while valid, don't have to dictate your actions. It's about creating a little bit of space between a stimulus and your response. Before Stoicism, my emotional regulation skills were, let's just say, under development. If Sarah said something that triggered my insecurities, I'd react instantly, often with defensiveness or hurt. It was like I had no filter between my brain and my mouth. One time, she casually mentioned that her ex used to make amazing pasta, and my brain immediately went to, she loves him more than me, I'm a failure in the kitchen. And then, of course, that thought jumped straight out of my mouth, leading to an utterly ridiculous argument about pasta. Stoicism taught me to pause, to observe my emotions without immediately identifying with them. It taught me to say, okay, I'm feeling jealous right now. Why am I feeling jealous? Is this a rational feeling? Or is it my old insecurity monster rearing its ugly head? This practice of mindfulness, simply being present and observing your internal landscape, became incredibly powerful. During difficult conversations, instead of interrupting or getting defensive, I started taking deep breaths. I'd mentally repeat the Stoic idea of premeditation of evils, not in a morbid way, but by mentally rehearsing how I might respond, calmly and rationally if a conversation got heated. I'd practice viewing the situation from her perspective, trying to understand her underlying feelings, rather than just reacting to her words. It wasn't perfect, and I still slipped up. But those slips became less frequent, less severe. It was like I was slowly, painstakingly, building an emotional muscle I never knew I had. And let me tell you, that muscle is worth its weight in gold in any relationship. It's the difference between a minor disagreement and a full-blown relationship apocalypse. The art of compassionate communication. Okay, so I was getting better at managing my internal chaos. But what about the external stuff? How did Stoicism help me actually talk to Sarah without turning every conversation into a potential minefield? This is where compassionate communication comes into play, a concept deeply intertwined with Stoic principles, even if they didn't have a fancy term for it back in the day. Active listening, beyond just hearing. Before my Stoic awakening, my idea of listening was mostly waiting for my turn to speak. I'd be formulating my rebuttal while Sarah was still talking, or I'd be mentally fact-checking her statements instead of actually absorbing what she was trying to convey. It was less of a dialogue and more of two monologues happening simultaneously, occasionally bumping into each other. Stoicism, with its emphasis on rationality and understanding, nudged me towards active listening. This isn't just about keeping quiet. It's about truly engaging with what your partner is saying, both verbally and non-verbally. It means putting aside your own agenda, your own preconceived notions, and genuinely trying to grasp their perspective. I started practicing something Epictetus essentially preached. Seek not to have things happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do happen, and you will go on well. In a relationship context, this means accepting your partner's reality, even if it differs from yours. So, when Sarah would express a feeling, instead of immediately trying to fix it or argue it away, I'd try to paraphrase what I heard, ask clarifying questions, and validate her feelings. Things like, "So, if I'm understanding correctly, you're feeling a bit overwhelmed by work right now, and you need some quiet time to recharge?" This simple act of mirroring not only showed her I was truly listening, but also helped me ensure I actually understood her. No more assumptions, no more jumping to conclusions. I remember one time Sarah was incredibly frustrated about a situation with a friend. My old self would have jumped in with advice or tried to minimize her feelings. But with my newfound Stoic lens, I just listened. I nodded, I made eye contact, and I simply said, "That sounds incredibly frustrating, and I can see why you'd feel that way." And you know what? She visibly relaxed. She didn't need me to solve it. She just needed to be heard and understood. It was a revelation. Clear and concise communication. Saying what you mean and meaning what you say. Another area where Stoicism shone a light was in clear and concise communication. As a recovering overthinker, I used to beat around the bush, drop hints, and expect Sarah to somehow magically decipher my convoluted internal monologues. This, as you can imagine, led to a lot of misunderstandings and unnecessary drama. The Stoics were all about clarity and directness. Seneca, for example, talked about the importance of plain speaking. It's about expressing your needs, your feelings, and your boundaries directly, respectfully, and without manipulation. No more passive aggression, no more assuming. I started using I statements. I feel emotion when situation happens because my need isn't met. For example, instead of, "You never spend time with me anymore," which is an accusation and likely to lead to defensiveness, I learned to say, "I feel a bit lonely when we don't have dedicated time together because connection is important to me." It's a subtle but powerful shift. It takes ownership of your feelings and communicates a need rather than making a demand. This also extended to setting boundaries. In the past, I'd often say yes to things I didn't want to do, leading to resentment. Stoicism taught me to value my own peace of mind and respectfully communicate my limits. Saying no became easier, not because I was being selfish, but because I was being honest and honoring my own well-being, which ultimately contributed to a healthier relationship dynamic. Forgiveness and letting go, decluttering the relationship backpack. And finally, the often overlooked but utterly crucial aspect of forgiveness and letting go of past grievances. Relationships are messy. People make mistakes. We all do. Before Stoicism, I had a mental spreadsheet of every slight, every missed expectation, every annoying habit. It was like carrying a giant, heavy backpack filled with all the past hurts and disappointments, and every new disagreement just added another brick. Stoicism, particularly the idea of focusing on the present and what you can control, made me realize how utterly pointless and destructive it was to cling to past transgressions. Marcus Aurelius spoke about not being distressed by things you don't control, and that includes the past. You can't change what happened, but you can change how you react to it now. Forgiveness, for me, became less about excusing behavior and more about releasing myself from the burden of resentment. It's an act of self-care. It's about understanding that holding on to anger or bitterness only punishes you. It doesn't magically rewind time or make the other person feel worse. When Sarah and I had a disagreement, Instead of bringing up that time you forgot our anniversary 3 years ago, I learned to address the present issue. If an apology was given, I learned to accept it fully and move on, rather than dragging the issue back into the light every few months. This process of letting go decluttered our relationship backpack significantly, making our journey forward much lighter and more enjoyable. It built a foundation of trust and allowed us to truly start fresh after conflicts, rather than carrying the emotional baggage from one argument to the next. The unexpected perks. Alright, so we've talked about the nitty-gritty of how I applied Stoicism to specific relationship challenges. But what about the bigger picture? What were the unforeseen bonuses, the delightful surprises that popped up as I continued down this Stoic path? Because let me tell you, the ripple effects were far greater than I ever anticipated. Increased self-awareness, the ultimate relationship upgrade. One of the most profound perks was a massive surge in my self-awareness. Before Stoicism, I was a passenger in my own emotional roller coaster. My moods dictated my day, and my insecurities dictated my reactions. I was completely at the mercy of external events and internal chatter. Stoicism, through its emphasis on introspection and self-examination, forced me to become a detective of my own mind. I started identifying my triggers, understanding the root causes of my anxiety, fear of abandonment, and recognizing my unhelpful thought patterns. It was like finally getting a user manual for my own brain, complete with troubleshooting tips. This newfound self-awareness wasn't just good for me, it was incredible for my relationship with Sarah. When I understood why I reacted a certain way, I could communicate it to her. Instead of just blowing up, I could say, "Hey, I'm feeling a bit insecure right now because X happened, and it's reminding me of old pattern. I need a moment to process this." This transparency was revolutionary. It fostered empathy and understanding between us. She wasn't just dealing with an emotional outburst. She was dealing with a partner who was actively working on themselves and could articulate their inner world. It also made me a more resilient individual. Life throws curveballs, right? And relationships are no exception. Before, a minor hiccup in our relationship would send me into a tailspin. Now, with a better understanding of my own mind and a stronger emotional toolkit, I could weather those storms with much greater ease. I realized that my happiness wasn't dependent on Sarah's every mood or action, but on my own internal state. And that's a truly liberating feeling. Emotional resilience, bouncing back like a boss. This leads directly to the next perk, emotional resilience. If self-awareness is knowing what's going on inside, resilience is your ability to bounce back when things get tough. And in any long-term relationship, tough times will come. Arguments will happen. Disappointments will crop up. External stressors will try to invade your bubble. Before Stoicism, I was incredibly fragile. A heated argument with Sarah could ruin my entire week. I'd replay every word, stew in resentment, and let it cast a long shadow over everything. I was emotionally brittle. Stoicism taught me to view challenges not as personal attacks or catastrophic failures, but as opportunities for growth. It taught me the concept of amor fati, a love of fate, or accepting everything that happens as necessary for your own development. This doesn't mean you like difficult situations, but you recognize that they are part of life, and you can learn from them. So, when Sarah and I would have a disagreement, instead of collapsing into a heap of despair, I'd approach it differently. I'd ask myself, what can I learn from this? How can I respond constructively? What part of this is within my control? It shifted my focus from dwelling on the negative to finding solutions and moving forward. We started viewing disagreements not as threats to our relationship, but as opportunities to understand each other better and strengthen our bond. It was like we were building a stronger, more flexible bridge together with every challenge we navigated. And this resilience wasn't just for big fights. It was for the small, everyday annoyances too. The forgotten chore, the different opinions on weekend plans. Instead of these leading to simmering resentment, they became minor bumps in the road that we could navigate with a bit more grace and a lot less drama. Our relationship became less of a tightrope walk and more of a sturdy stroll, even on windy days. A deeper, more authentic connection. Perhaps the most beautiful and unexpected perk of all was the development of a deeper, more authentic connection with Sarah. When I stopped trying to control her, when I stopped projecting my anxieties onto her, and when I started truly listening and communicating clearly, something magical happened. She felt seen. She felt heard. She felt respected for who she was, not for who I wanted her to be. This newfound freedom allowed her to be more herself, and in turn, I could appreciate her more fully. Our conversations became richer, our intimacy deeper, and our laughter more genuine. We started appreciating each other's individual strengths and quirks instead of trying to smooth them out. We became a team, navigating life's adventures side by side, rather than two individuals constantly wrestling for control. It's a beautiful irony, isn't it? By focusing on myself, on what I could control, my thoughts, my reactions, my character, I actually created the space for a much more fulfilling and loving connection with someone else. It wasn't about changing her, it was about changing me. And that change, that stoic makeover, was the best thing I ever did for my relationship. Practical takeaways. Okay, so you're probably thinking, this all sounds great, but how do I get in on this stoic relationship magic? Don't worry, I've got you covered. Here are 3 to 5 actionable tips that you can start applying to your relationships today. No toga required. Tip 1. Master the dichotomy of control. Become a control freak of your own mind. This is the bedrock, folks. Identify what's within your control and what isn't, and then ruthlessly let go of the latter. Seriously, make this your daily mantra. When you feel that familiar knot of anxiety tightening in your stomach about something your partner did or didn't do, ask yourself, is this in my control? If yes, take action. Communicate. Express your feelings respectfully. Focus on your contribution to the situation. If no, practice acceptance. Breathe. Remind yourself that you can only control your reaction. Don't waste precious mental energy on things you can't change. For example, your partner leaves their socks on the floor again. Old me. Ugh, they're so inconsiderate. They never listen. This means they don't respect me. New stoic me. Okay, the socks are there. I can't magically make them disappear or rewind time. But I can choose whether to get upset, or I can choose to calmly ask them to pick them up. Or I can choose to pick them up myself if it's not a big deal. My reaction is my power. This might sound simple, but consistently applying it is a superpower. Tip 2. Implement the pause principle, your emotional speed bump. This is all about creating that crucial space between stimulus and response. Before you react emotionally to something your partner says or does, P-A-U-S-E. Pause. Take a deep breath. Count to 5. Acknowledge. Recognize the emotion you're feeling. I'm feeling angry, or I'm feeling hurt. Don't judge it, just observe it. Understand. Ask yourself why you're feeling this way. Is it a rational response to the present situation, or is an old insecurity rearing its head? Strategize. How do you want to respond? What's the most constructive way to move forward? Execute. Respond thoughtfully, not impulsively. This isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about managing them. It's about choosing your response rather than being hijacked by your feelings. Practice this in small moments. When you're annoyed by a minor habit, when you feel a little jealous, when you're tempted to interrupt. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes. Think of it as installing emotional speed bumps in your brain. Tip 3. Practice empathetic listening. Hear beyond the words. We touched on this earlier, but it's so critical, it deserves its own bullet point. When your partner is speaking, truly listen with the intention of understanding, not just responding. Put down your phone, make eye contact, and mentally, or even physically if it helps, clear your mind of your own thoughts and judgments. Ask clarifying questions. What I hear you saying is X, is that right? Validate their feelings. That sounds really frustrating. Even if you don't agree with their perspective, you can still acknowledge their experience. The goal isn't to win an argument, it's to build connection and mutual understanding. This simple act can diffuse so much tension and make your partner feel incredibly valued. Remember, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And active listening is a huge billboard for, I care about you. Tip 4. Communicate your needs, not your demands. The I statement. Power up. Stop expecting your partner to be a mind reader and start using I statements to clearly and kindly communicate your needs, feelings, and boundaries. Instead of, you always make me feel ignored. Try, I feel a bit disconnected when we don't have time to talk at the end of the day, and I'd love to set aside 15 minutes to chat. This shifts the focus from blame to personal experience, making it much easier for your partner to hear and respond constructively. It's about taking responsibility for your own emotional landscape and inviting your partner to collaborate in meeting your needs. It's a game changer for respectful, effective communication. Tip 5. Embrace imperfection. Yours and theirs. The freedom of good enough. Finally, embrace the Stoic idea of accepting things as they are, including the imperfections of your partner and, perhaps more importantly, yourself. No one is perfect, and no relationship is a fairy tale. There will be disagreements, flaws, and moments of irritation. Instead of striving for an unrealistic ideal, aim for good enough. Accept that your partner will sometimes annoy you, sometimes disappoint you, and sometimes simply be human. Extend grace, both to them and to yourself. Let go of the need for them to be different, and focus on appreciating them for who they are. This also applies to your own Stoic journey. You're not going to become Marcus Aurelius overnight. You'll slip up, you'll react impulsively, you'll forget these principles. And that's okay. The Stoic path is a practice, not a destination. Be patient with yourself, learn from your missteps, and keep showing up. Dive deeper into the Stoic pond. If any of this resonated with you, I highly encourage you to explore Stoic literature and resources. Start with the classics: Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, Epictetus's Discourses and Enchiridion, and Seneca's Letters from a Stoic. There are also tons of modern Stoic authors and communities out there that can help you apply these ancient ideas to your modern life. Seriously, this isn't just philosophy for academics. It's a practical operating system for a more peaceful, resilient, and ultimately, more fulfilling life, especially when it comes to those precious relationships we hold so dear. Stoicism can truly empower anyone to build healthier, happier, and more fulfilling connections. It did for me, and I truly believe it can for you too. All right, relationship adventurers, that's our Stoic journey for today. I hope this deep dive into how Stoicism transformed my own relationship has given you some food for thought, and, more importantly, some actionable steps to take in your own life. If you found this helpful, hit that like button. It really helps the channel out. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you tried applying Stoicism to your relationships? What were your biggest takeaways? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more practical wisdom to navigate the beautiful chaos of life. Until next time, Stay wise, stay kind, and keep practicing that emotional muscle.